Founded in the 7th decade of the 1st century, the city of Chester's first inhabitants were the Roman Empire's 2nd Legion, who made DEVA VICTRIX their legionary headquarters. Before the century was out, the 20th Legion, the Valeria Victrix, had made the fortress their home and set about transforming DEVA into the settlement that almost 2,000 years later would become the city that we know today. In part 1, we looked at the column base in Watergate Street, the alleged harbour wall, the amphitheatre, that wonderful hypercaust on Bridge Street, and also the remains of the southeast angle tower. We'll start off part 2 with a look at what could be the largest remains in the whole of DEVA, the entry and exit roads, and the subsequent sites of the fortress's gates. Okay, maybe slightly controversial, as none of the gates exist, or do they? And the roads are clearly not what you would expect to see when examining a so-called Roman road. However, today's road pattern more or less matches exactly where those original roads entered DEVA almost 2 millennia ago, and at least 2 of the gate sites are recognisable as such today. We'll start at the north end of the city, and the Via Decimana, the Roman name for what is today's Northgate Street, and the Porta Decimana, the North Gate itself. So this is the area of the North Gate of Chester, the Porta Decimana. In front of us is the Via Decimana, the road coming in from the north and roads which led to the Wirral. We also have a wonderful arch which looks the part, but unfortunately it's not. It's Georgian, and it was built in 1810 to replace the former medieval Northgate, notorious for its prison that used to be there. This gate sits exactly on the site of the Porta Decimana. But alas, the Via Decimana, the road, although it's on exactly the right position here, it veers off to the right as we go into Chester. Standing on today's Northgate, looking out of the city, it's not hard to imagine standing on the Porta Decimana, looking out towards Wirral, and coming into the city, looking at the Via Decimana, which would have veered off just to the right there through those buildings, but only slightly, and then carried on towards Chester Cross as it made its way through into Fortress DEVA. Next up, I'll look at the east to west road, the Via Principalis, today's Watergate Street on the west of the city and Eastgate Street on the east, and the east gate, the Porta Principalis Sinistra, and the west gate, the Porta Principalis Dextra. This is Eastgate Street, the Via Principalis, looking westwards into DEVA VICTRIX. Today's road sits precisely on the same alignment as its Roman predecessor, until approximately halfway between St Werburgh Street and Northgate Street. Then the modern road runs a few feet south of the Via Principalis, which, looking into the city here, is approximately at this point. Down on the ground and you'll find one of Chester's most famous landmarks, the Eastgate and Clock Tower. Built in 1768 with the clock added in 1899, it sits exactly on the site of the Porta Principalis Sinistra. Sinistra is Latin for left hand. This area was cleared in the mid-18th century in order to rebuild, and when the old medieval Eastgate was dismantled, the former Roman arches, up to then hidden, were revealed, and fortunately sketches were made at the time. This one, from Joseph Hemingway's 1831 publication, The History of Chester, shows the double-arched gate bisecting the roadway, with a similar affair some feet behind, while this sketch from 1760 shows that same double arch, but this time without another behind it. It's actually not clear how many arches made up the Porta Principalis Sinistra, but I'd also read a snippet that part of the structure still existed, which would be absolutely brilliant, and with the sketch in mind, I went searching. I've had a good scout around while gaining many a suspicious glance from passers-by, and I think I've found what I'm looking for. Have a look at this. Now, I'm not saying it's Roman, but bear in mind the 18th century sketches, and it does seem to match. If it's contemporary with the current gate, why not just build a wall? It does appear in very good condition, a bit too good maybe, but if it had been encased since Norman times, then why couldn't it be a remaining part of the Porta Principalis Sinistra? Looking down the hill, this is Watergate Street, which leads to the medieval Watergate on the city walls, the racecourse and ultimately North Wales, and would have been the route to North Wales and ultimately Anglesey during the Roman occupation. In front, up on the ridge, is the former Holy Trinity Church, now a cocktail bar. The Via Principalis, the main east-west road on the fortress's western side, would have run directly through there, and it was also here that the Porta Principalis Dextra, dextra being Latin for right hand, the western Roman gate, would have also been located. Modern Watergate Street runs up towards Chester Cross and into the centre of the fortress, but as I said earlier, the Via Principalis on its western edge would have run more or less through this building, and this would have been the site here of the Porta Principalis Dextra, the western gate. The last of the four roads, the Via Praetoria, entering and exit the fortress from the south, is here, and the Porta Praetoria, the south gate, is here. This is Bridge Street, looking north into the city, the Via Praetoria. The modern road runs exactly on its Roman predecessor's alignment, all the way to Chester Cross. The southern gate, the Porta Praetoria, would have stood astride Bridge Street, and the former St Michael's Church on the right. And it's rather a coincidence that both former Roman gate sites, which haven't got a medieval replacement, both have redundant churches on their sites. Walking north into Chester along Bridge Street, despite its modern building facings, this largely medieval style of town planning was laid upon the Roman road layout within the fortress. Here, on the former Via Praetoria, which is likely to still remain beneath my feet, goods and people would have left for and arrived from Whitchurch, Wroxeter and London, known as Mediolanum, Vericonium and Londinium for those 1st to 5th century Cestrians. Joining at Chester Cross with Watergate and Eastgate Street, the Via Principalis, and Northgate Street, the Via Decumana, although not directly as buildings blocked the way of the Via Decumana. These roads were vital for the success of DEVA VICTRIX operation over 4 centuries, and is a testament to their success that their route is still recognisable and navigable some 1600 years after their builders left, and just as tangible as any stone ruin. And finally, a last note regarding the fortress's roads, and I'll add the full route of the Via Decumana, despite it not following today's Northgate Street, but it completes the picture of the 4 main roads entering and exiting DEVA. So staying on Northgate Street, our next destination is Pret A Manger, and in their basement is something very, very interesting. So I'm now heading north from Chester Cross up Northgate Street. My next port of call is the Pret A Manger coffee shop, which should be just here on my left, I think. Yep, you can see the sign for it. Well, the staff have kindly allowed me access to their basement, and a huge thank you to them. I shall of course purchase a latte. So what are we looking at? Well, this is part of the northeast side of the Principia, technically the fortress's HQ and administrative centre, and the most important building at DEVA. These are the remains of the 3rd century rebuild of the Principia, after the 2nd century building fell into disuse. Now, excavated during rebuilding at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, these column bases once formed part of a huge aisle of columns. And it may look as though these columns are horizontally coming through the wall, and I believe that's because during the excavation period, some 120 years ago, this is the position in which they were found, with, I'm assuming, the rest of the column still embedded in rock on the other side. Now, down here in this small basement, it's hard to imagine today these columns once rose potentially some 50 feet to support a huge stone arch roof, witnessing the comings and goings of the Legion's most senior dignitaries. Staying within the Principia building, we'll move just slightly north to Hamilton Place, and here you will come across the remains of the Legion headquarters strong room. Going west away from the Town Hall Square and past the Dublin Packet pub, we find on my right the remains of the strong room. Unfortunately, it's almost impossible to obtain decent footage due to the reflective nature of the window which protects it, and the fact that it is also filthy dirty. So, the strong room, what does that mean? Well, here we're still on the Principia, the headquarters building of the 20th Legion here in DEVA. The strong room was the equivalent to a bank vault where the Legion's finances were kept, including wages and savings for the soldiers. It was also a room which was guarded 24 hours a day, as you would expect. Dug into the bedrock, there was only one way into the strong room, and that was from above. This is a composite image of the front view that I've put together in the hope of obtaining a clearer view of the strong room. It's still not great, but hopefully it will convey something of what is visible. And here, the view from the side. Above the strong room was an area known as the Aedes. This was where the Legion's standards were displayed. There may also have been statues to the current emperor, and also altars to some of the gods. This reconstruction from the information board shows the strong room below with a number of chests, probably containing coinage of the Legion, whilst above the Aedes with the Legion standards are all on display. The final place I'll look at in this part is on the site of the wall's northwest corner, where the angle tower was once situated. Here you'll find an echo of that former building. I'm walking north along the western edge of the fortress. The western wall would have been exactly where I'm standing, probably a bit further out into the road. And at this point here, we're on the northwest corner. The medieval wall would have continued that way, as you can see over the road. But in front of us, we have, on the ground, some markings laid out in brick. And that is a commemoration to the northwest angle tower, which used to be located here. Very similar to the southeast one that we saw in the last series, in the last part, near the amphitheatre. Unfortunately, we got this sort of temporary affair stairway, but you can still see the angle here, and our wall would have come through here. The angle tower would have been positioned here, and where I'm standing now would have been the wall again, and then it would have followed the medieval wall here on the north side of the fortress. From up here on the wall you can probably get a better view of it. You can see it down there, the brick marking where the angle tower used to be. I'm up on the medieval wall at the moment, so pretty much on the area of the Roman wall itself. If we climb up these stairs quickly, and we should, if we put the camera over, and there we go, we see a good view of our markings denoting where the northwest angle tower used to be.